A very warm welcome to our online event, Female Empowerment in Tech Industries, organized by the delegation of the Catalan government in Germany, located in Berlin. In Catalonia, the pandemic has pushed digitalization 5 years ahead. Digital infrastructures are now connecting our lives much more than in 2019. And thanks to the smart cut strategy of the Catalan government that was launched years before the pandemic, there was a solid basis for this exponential growth. But still, what a challenge. The smart cut strategy includes aspects such as improving the region's digital literacy, guaranteeing fiber connection even in rural areas, or helping our businesses to focus on the digital industry sector to foster a prosperous economic future. By this, equal opportunities are to be created for both citizens living in big cities such as Barcelona, Girona, or Tarragona, but also for those living in towns and small villages. The idea is to potentially attract big companies to even the smallest town. Actually, the tech sector has up to now created about 130,000 jobs in Catalonia. But we are aware that especially women are still struggling to benefit from these new opportunities, as it is the case all around Europe. This is why we need to make female talents visible and create a vision of successful women in tech. Girls need to be inspired by the examples of women who've made it. The Catalan government has therefore created the Women in Tech plan to help girls and women seek their professional future in tech industries. In fact, today, we will be listening to women giving us examples of how to be successful in tech industries. I am delighted to greet to our talented speakers today. Ms. Ana Navarro-Schlegel, Vice President of NetApp and one of the world's most influential women in technology, according to Analytics Insight. She was born in Olot, Catalonia, and lives now in Santa Clara, California, from where she's joining us today. Mrs. Dr. Nakima Steffelbauer, joining us from Berlin. She is CEO and founder of Women Loop. This organization addresses the exclusion of immigrant and refugee women from job opportunities by training them for jobs in the German tech industry. Mr. Franziska Beckert is also joining from Berlin today. She is a researcher and author of the book Gender Diversity in Tech Industries, as well as a social justice and diversity trainer. Mrs. Corinna Nohn, from Handelsblatt newspaper will be our moderator today and is located in Wuppertal. A very warm welcome again to our speakers, the moderator, and of course to you, our dear audience today. I now call upon Ms. Nohn and digitally hand the micro over to you for the moderation of the event.
Hello, you can see and hear me. Thanks a lot to you, Marie, and good evening, respectively, good morning to everybody. My name is Corinna, and I have the honor to lead us through this, and I'm sure it's going to be that way, inspiring panel. Before I get to introducing and welcoming our first guest, Ana Navarro-Schlegel, I want to make a few quick announcements. The first section of this event, there's only going to be the two of us, Ana and me, on the screens. We're talking about our topic. After about 15 minutes, two more guests will be joining us, and we'll have hopefully a lively conversation for another about 30 minutes. Until in the end, we will try to answer your questions, the questions you out there watching via YouTube can post. Yes, so, and in the end, I can tell you already now, yeah, we will be happy if you share the YouTube post afterwards. So this is the process, and you can all see how special it is that we are that we have come together today and have been connected this way. To a certain extent, we owe that to the pandemic situation. During the last year, we all have developed new skills and especially in communication and connecting virtually. And we have got to know new digital tools and techniques. The tech industry, its small and especially its big players, are profiting by the urge for digitalization. Just yesterday, Apple and Facebook have reported new growth figures and have shattered Wall Street expectations with their earnings. However, if we look at the big tech giants, at Zoom, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, whose tools and whose techniques and services are becoming essential, even indispensable parts of our daily professional and also of our private lives in this pandemic situation, we will find out that there are hardly any women in charge. So that is our subject tonight, where you will get to know some role models, and we will talk about their successes, advices, maybe pains. Women who make it to the top in the tech industry are rare, and naturally those women who make it have to, in addition to their normal work, explain and talk a lot about how it is as a female leader in tech. Therefore, I'm delighted to now welcome Anna Navarro-Schlegel, Vice President of the Global Portfolio to Market Organization at NetApp. That's, hello, Anna. Very warm welcome.
Dankeschön.
Yes. Just a few words to NetApp. It's a data management company with over 10,000 employees worldwide, and it's headquartered in Sunnyvale, California. So good morning, Anna.
Thank you. Good morning.
Anna speaks at least 6 languages, as we have heard, maybe even 8 or 9. And she's got a really long and inspiring and impressive resume. So we don't have that much time, but I can tell you can study it on LinkedIn and in the internet. It's really impressive. She's also the global executive sponsor of NetApp's Women in Technology organization, and among many awards for your professional achievements, Anna, and your support for others. Most recently, you were featured on the cover, as we have already heard, of Analytics Insight magazine as one of the 10 most impactful women in technology. So Anna, maybe you want to share this with us. Do you remember the first time at NetApp you pushed the button for the top floor and knew that that is where you belonged to?
You know, it was my first week, actually. I had been, a head of globalization at VMware in the past, and I joined NetApp because I knew that they were going very fast, but they were making some mistakes. And within 1 or 2 weeks, I asked to speak to the CEO. And when they heard that I had, been an executive at VMware, he asked to meet. He put me on the boardroom. That very first month that I was at NetApp, the founders were there. They had just had a board meeting. And you know what I did? I started speaking in German. And I spoke in German. And I said, my name is Anna Schlegel. Ich bin Anna Schlegel. Ich komme aus VMware. And then they said, what are you doing speaking in German? And I said, well, we're not global enough. And they were so supportive, they asked me right away, because I came in so prepared and I shocked them so much. They weren't ready to see somebody go in and be so brave. They asked me, what do you want? And I said, I need to start this team, this team, this team. I need this finance. And he said, you got it. And that took many years of preparation to go into front of a CEO and a boardroom. That's when I knew I belonged. They said yes to me. And so for the last 12 years, I've just been asking and pushing and pushing.
So you said this took a long time. This took years of preparation. Maybe you want to share with us some of the hard moments or the lessons you've learned.
Yeah, so I actually studied Germanistic in the Humboldt in Berlin. So that's where I have my postgrad studies. I moved to the States when I was 23 in 92, and I started my startup. So these were always very bold movements. You know, as a Catalan, I studied Germanistic. I didn't know one word of German. So you have to throw yourself where nobody else is going. And I always thought that my advantage was to be the only one. You know, if I didn't see anybody studying Germanistic at the faculty in Barcelona, that's where I went. If people were afraid of talking to the CEO, I prepared myself to talk to the CEO. If I was a philologist and I wanted to get in big tech, I had to study engineering, right? People are asking me, well, you're on top of NetApp. It's an engineering company. How did you do this? As a philologist, I'm like, well, I've been studying engineering for the last 30 years, right? So you have to prepare yourself really, really well. It's a very slow process, but you need to think of the long game, like where is it that you want to go? And we, as women, we go through different periods of our lives, right? Sometimes we're single, sometimes we're married, sometimes we have kids. And so you can push and press at different levels of exhaustion. You know, sometimes you want to take a year off. I think about it in years, you know, like this year I'm going to dedicate it to my kids, or this year I'm going to, you know, repair something with my partner. This year I'm going to go back into university. So you have to plan your life. Like I always talk about, people prepare their vacations and their holidays very nicely, you know, but we don't prepare or think about our career. So I always encourage women to really think, what is it that you want? And then go for it, right? And prepare it and start doing little steps.
Mm-hmm. Today, you're really active in supporting also other women and being a role model, helping them. How important have role models in professional life be for you? Because I can imagine 20 years ago, 10 years ago, there's been even less role models as there are today.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why I started so many nonprofits. I lead like 5 nonprofits. They're all to help little kids or women for the last, 15, 20 years. I did not see the ladies, right? And even if I was a supervisor or a manager, I was like, where were the women? And I would see sometimes, some women were the CMO, right? The chief marketing officer typically could be a woman, or the vice president of HR, human resources is a woman. But when you started talking to the product teams, the engineering teams, I could not find them, right? And
so what are the challenges? I mean, we're looking at the Silicon Valley, and it seems to be a renewal of the proposal of the land of the possibilities. We have all those great stories, the myth of the startup in the garage and all of that, and everything seems to be possible. Where are the challenges? Why are there so few women?
Women are not going there. I don't, there is. So I've been here for 30 years. I had my first startup and it was fine. And I don't know, we need to be more daring. And we need to learn. We need to learn how to ask for capital. We need to understand how to join a board. We need to be prepared to speak as an executive. We need to learn how to be a good person, a good manager. What are the rules of the game, right? Mm-hmm. When you get into these Fortune companies, it's not business as usual, right? These are companies that want to be number one, are very aggressive. And guys do really well being very aggressive, right? I grew up, in a Catholic school, in a university, first in Barcelona, where we weren't asking many questions. When you join these companies, you quickly understand, if you want to go up, there's certain things you have to learn to maneuver, to strategize, to be a good team collaborator. You have to observe, it doesn't matter. You observe the guys, you observe the few females that are there. And what is it that you're lacking, right? So maybe you're not a good listener. Maybe you don't understand this technology. Maybe you haven't learn how to join a board. This is why I say you have to kind of design and really think, who is it that you want to be? And these things take steps. You cannot just join a company and hope that you're going to be the vice president of the company. This is going to take you 10, 15 years, right? It's you need to learn, okay, you're an individual contributor. If you want to make it to a manager, what are the projects and the programs that you're going to have to learn, and go and take a class on how to be an awesome manager. And then
that almost sounds as if you were all right with the rules, how they are and how the system works. Or do you see yourself in a role that you learned how the system works in order to join and then maybe change the rules and make them better? And how can you change them?
It's both. It's both. And I can't speak, you know, I've roamed around several companies here in the Silicon Valley, and every company is different. There are companies that are speeding, you know, making women more visible. But I have to tell you, it depends on the company. If you work at Facebook, there's more women working at Facebook than if you work on a hardcore engineering company like NetApp. Facebook is going to have more social media people, more marketing people, more user experience people, right? NetApp is about data storage management, standing up data centers. So that's not as appealing to women, right? To go and play around with the cables on how you set up a storage system. Very different than if you're going to think of how the Facebook page is going to look like. So that's why, as a person, men and women have to think of what's their passion and what does that business need. If you're not quite there, then what is it that you need to learn? So it's a constant reflection of, I want to get there, but I don't know how to, but I'm going to start doing little steps. And very, very important to have mentors that listen to you and can have a candid conversation of saying, Anna, you're not ready to be a director. Mm-hmm. And here's why. And talk to a lot of people. You know, you have to have these circles of trust with people that will tell you, go and learn this, go and practice this. And it's time for you to move companies so that you learn something else. Mm-hmm. So I think for women that want to go up, rotation is very important. You have to learn how these businesses work, right? And even if you're just, you know, in marketing, you want to learn all the different aspects of marketing, right? So rotation to me is crucial.
I've read in a NetApp blog written by Deborah McCohen, your Chief Human Resources Officer, about a panel you had on this year's International Women's Day. You also took part in that. And it was really interesting. She was writing about the same things. And she also made the point how important are advocates and sponsors. So can you remember, or who was one of those advocates for you, or how did you find them? I mean, you don't go and ring the bell at the top level and say, hey, I need some sponsors. How do you find those sponsors?
So sponsors are very different than mentors. I think women need to go first through many mentors and be very open to receive feedback on how to form yourself. Go and get very, very real of what is it that you need. Many women want to make director, but they don't want to do what it takes to be a director, the tough choices because, oh, she's my girlfriend and I don't want to hurt her feelings. These are businesses, right? So you want to be ethical and human and all of that. But at the end of the day, these are businesses with numbers and metrics and data, and you need to bring it, right? So form yourself with these mentors. Once you are a director or a VP, you are going to need a sponsor, because a sponsor is that person that's going to bring you into the room, that is going to speak on your behalf. It's very important what's being said about Anna when Anna is not in the room. So those are sponsors. And sometimes you don't ask them, can you be my sponsor, right? And now it's difficult because we're not in the cafeterias or in the halls, but I have asked several people during my career, would you mind having lunch with me once every other month? And some of these guys, because usually it's been guys, say, no, I don't have time. And maybe I just meet with them once. But when I found a couple that I really connected with, that's when I made vice president. That's when I opened up and I said, look, I think I can offer more to the company. Here's what I'm thinking. We should stand these. Sponsors usually are executives and they don't have a lot of time. They do it out of their kindness of their free time. And, they're running very fast. They have a lot of pressure. So you need to be very well prepared and formulated into why is it that you're looking for a sponsor, right? Maybe they can recommend a coach for you. Maybe they can go and gather feedback about you. Maybe they're going to put you through a 360, exercise. And they're just cool people, they're just there with you, watching you go. And I will forever repeat the name of who's my sponsor, who is Björn Fondekar, who I spoke yesterday to thank him again, because he's who presented my candidacy to be a vice president. And this guy was the chief transformation officer at NetApp. And I worked with him for years, making him successful. So you have to work it. These things don't come easy, right?
Okay. In that blog entry, I read this sentence, Deborah McCone wrote it, as women, we challenge the status quo every day, not only for ourselves, but for the future generations of women who will follow us. So now that the two of us have to come to an end with this duo conversation, I would like to ask you one more question. We've talked about the startup garage myth, and actually talking about tech industry, we should mention the unicorns. And I want to introduce another fairy figure, the good fairy or the fairy godmother, and she can fulfill 3 wishes. 2 of those wishes are for the other panel guests who will join, but one is for you. If you had one wish that that fairy figure could fulfill for the tech industry, for women in the tech industry, what would it be?
Find your own female succession plan. So when you're about to leave a company, when you're about to take on a new role, you will have prepared a woman to take on your position. And you will have worked with this woman for the last 2, 3, 4 years to expose her to all the difficult decisions that you're making. So pick a woman, train them.
Okay, thanks a lot. So now we would like to join Nakima Steffelbauer and Franziska Beckert. We would like to add them to the panel and discuss on with 4 panelists. Hello. Yes, Nakima, I would say she's a contact woman between North America and Europe, between top and down, between tech and women. She has earned her master and her PhD title at Harvard University. She has started her professional career in the US and today is the division director of the digital client service at Ergo Technology and Services. It's a daughter of the German reinsurance blue chip company Munich Re, and as a founder and CEO of Frauenloop, as well as in various networks, she brings together people, women, she connects them and tries to leverage their benefits. Franziska is a woman in another area of tech. She owns technical and engineering degrees and today is a project manager for software solutions at the well-known service company Dussmann. She's also, as we have heard, which sounds great to me, a social justice and diversity trainer. And she has done research and published about gender diversity in tech, or rather about the monoculture, since her work is titled Why Women Are Still Underrepresented. So, Franziska, you have had a special intensive look at the European tech industry. Can you tell us where we stand, how little women there are today?
Yeah, well, warm welcome from my side to everyone. Thank you for having me. Well, if we look at the European tech industry, it is significant that we can see differences in the participation of women in different countries. And very quickly, you see that in Eastern Europe, especially Bulgaria, Lithuania, and these countries, you have a significant higher participation in the tech industry. So in Bulgaria, I think we're at 30%, which is a good number because this actually passes this threshold that you need to create a better community, basically, for women. And it encourages women more to go in this field. And when we look at Germany and more Western European countries, we see very significantly that Germany is at like 16.5% in 2018, which is a really low number. Spain and France and also Great Britain is basically the same level, a little bit higher. But in Europe, Germany is really bad when it comes to female participation. And the US actually has better numbers. There we look at a participation of 25%.
You've also, Franziska, you have also evaluated the history of women in tech and especially the evolving of stereotypes. Maybe you can tell us from your point of sight, like what are the challenges and why aren't that many women joining the tech industry?
That's a very complex question that we will not be able to answer tonight, unfortunately, I'm afraid. But let's look at a few key points, maybe. I think it's really important to understand that the computing industry, especially in its early days, wasn't always dominated by men as we know it today. It's been a little different. And in the really early days, women were actually referred to as computers because they did most of the programming work, while men were working on the hardware because they thought this is the more important work. And then this changed over time, but we look at, like, there's an article from the Cosmopolitan magazine from 1967, I think, where Grace Hopper is interviewed, and she tries to explain why programming is actually perfect for women and why women should do it. And she talks about programming being just like organizing a dinner. And she says, I think, quote, well, if it doesn't sound like women's work, it just is. So there was this attempt to connect programming and the skills you need to have for programming to stereotypical female attributes, or that were seen as female attributes at the time. And then this changed in the 60s and 70s through aptitude tests. And there was a vocational programming scale developed by two researchers called Cannon and Perry, who developed an aptitude test that looked for people who didn't like other people and really focused on mathematical skills. And at the time, men still had better access to education, and therefore they often had the better mathematical skills. And therefore the industry kind of made up its own stereotype and created this self-fulfilling prophecy and recruited up into the 80s people who didn't like other people. And this stereotype still exists until today, that the typical computer nerd doesn't like other people and works really isolated and is extremely good at math. But this is actually not what it takes to be a good programmer.
And that's probably, I mean, we probably all have this stereotype in front of our inner eye. This is probably one of the main problems for the industry, because the industry needs other people and diversity and others than those nerds sitting in front of their screens all night. So would you say we have just a huge problem with the stereotypes? People, women have the wrong imagination about the tech industry, what hinders them to join the companies?
But I think this has different layers to it. It's really complex topic again. And one of the
let's make it easy. Do you think there's a chance to change the stereotype again? I mean, if we're looking back and you said we had all those women computing and programming, those female software and engineers, and now we're missing them. We can do things about change the stereotypes.
Well, I think it's important to look at stereotypes as something that is made up by the humankind. So obviously it is in our power to change them, but we also have to look at what is going on in the industry, and there is scientific evidence that the industry discriminates against women and that we have a really, really high unconscious bias and unconscious gender bias. So we see women in general as a little less competent than we see men. And this is a giant problem. And until we don't change this, and until we don't give women the equal opportunities to enter the industry, to develop their own passions, I don't think the stereotype will actually change.
Okay.
Fortunately.
Well, then let's move on to Nakima, because I know you're really into these questions of stereotypes, unconscious bias, and how we can change corporate cultures, or what can we do about avoiding those or working against those unconscious biases.
I also wanted to add a point, if possible, just to the
go ahead.
To what Francisca was saying. There's also the framework when we're talking about wages and why women are not joining the industry and what can be done. It's not only about stereotypes and women perceiving the industry of tech as unwelcoming or not for them. It's also very much proven by studies by PayScale and the New York Times, deep dive research that shows that women's work is simply less valued. And as women enter an industry in larger numbers, the pay decreases by up to 34%. This has been proven to be the case in a wide variety of industries that were previously male dominated. And as women became designers, and it was not so male dominated, and as women became architects, and it was not so solely male dominated, the pay level decreased based on the perception more generally in society that women's work is not as valuable. And if the job can be done by women, you should be able to pay them less.
Okay, I'm just getting the news that you can't hear me very well. I tried to put these off.
We can't hear you.
Okay.
But now it's better, Corina, if you speak without the,
Now we can't hear again.
So they're on again. It was worse without.
it's better.
It's better.
Much better.
Yeah.
Let's
Much
stick
better.
with it. Now it's better. Okay. Yes. Nakima, I know that you, and for example, you with your NGO Frauenloop, you're really contributing also to the to be a role model and to let other women shine up as role models. Can you remember or tell us a bit about who have been your role models? Have they been in professional life or in private life? What has inspired you? And
so I have to take a leaf out of Anna's book there and say that actually I didn't have any. And one of the biggest drivers for my having created the NGO Frauenloop is to create more visible, more accessible role models and mentors for women who might, like me, not have any high-level, well-placed executives that they could speak to, approach throughout their careers, because it is so critical, and because not having had that, I realized that there were many mistakes and there were many steps that I could have skipped had I been in contact with someone who had gone through those steps before me. So that's one of the main drivers for having started Frauenloop and set it up to be almost exclusively female mentors teaching tech.
So what can we do to get along with those unconscious biases we all have and who will lead us to stereotypes and who will hinder us to be really objective to promote other people's careers? Nakima, do you have any suggestions or do you have experience, or what do you tell company leaders who ask you what can they do? How can they change processes in order to get along with those unconscious biases?
I think what I have said and what I believe very deeply is that leadership sends a message about diversity, whether they choose to address it or not. I think that it's very clearly something that women are looking for when they're navigating the job market, and it's something that seeing the absence of diversity in the top level positions is all the messaging that really matters when women are trying to determine how friendly and how accessible different sectors are. So it's something that should be important to the most profitable sectors of the companies that are getting funded and that are expanding, because those are the sectors that you want to have top talent applying to. And if you've alienated any sectors of society because it just looks so unwelcoming, it looks so cliquish, then you're doing yourself a disservice in terms of how you're then going to be able to recruit diversity. It can't be an afterthought. It can't be something you try to add in after you've built your team and everything is running smoothly, and now you need to kind of fix it retroactively. That doesn't work, in my opinion.
So when we were talking ahead of this panel, you said one of the problems is we need to work on the pipeline, and but as we look at many companies, a lot of women, especially in tech companies, don't even get to the point where they get addressed, or they don't get invited, or they don't make first assessment centers. And I think, Franziska, you found out that, or you wrote about it in your book, that you can even make a change as a company in the recruiting process if you just change the like
job
how
titles.
you address, how you address the people in the job title. Maybe you can say a few words about that.
Well, giving, especially in a language like German that is gendered, so you have like female and male descriptions of jobs, this can actually make a significant difference if you make sure that your job description is gender neutral. It's like women do feel more addressed if they're included in these job descriptions, but this is also working for studying programs, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The pipeline is just one aspect of the problem. The other problem is the leaky bucket problem, it's referred to in literature, which means women leave the tech industry twice as fast as men actually do, because the industry doesn't give them what they are looking for.
I would actually add to that the statistic that Franziska cited earlier about the 16.5% female representation in the industry in Germany. That's nothing to do with the number of technical graduates that are graduating in Germany. That's almost, I think that's a bit over double the amount. So you have this gap between the number of technical sciences graduates who are being produced by German universities and the number of those that are then actually employed in the job market is almost halved. And when you see that that's almost halved, then you think, what's going on here that women are not either applying or they're not getting through when they apply into these jobs.
Yes, Anna, you want to?
Yeah, I agree with everything Nakima and Franziska are saying. Is very similar. You know, the stats in the States is actually that there's 33% of the females that are in high tech are women. Employees, sorry, are women. But then when you look at who are these ladies inside the corporation, they're lawyers, they're marketing, they are human resources, they're support, they're receptionists, etc. Who are the people creating these technologies? For example, inside NetApp, we have 2 technical teams, 2 business units. In one, we have like 5 or 4% female, which is the pure cloud, brand new #1 company in the world. Like these are new technologies. So innovation is missing coming in from women. You can look at number of patents. You know, it's mainly guys, okay? In the other business unit where I am, we are 17%. This is why Nakima founded her org. This is why I founded 5 nonprofits to look at this. But we have to see that there is a lot of discussion right now, right? And Karina, by you talking through this right now, the ask is all these guys listening, hopefully there's all guys listening, and all these women listening that have the opportunity to hire. Go and find talent. And this is not just about male and female. This is about different colors and different opinions. And one thing that I would ask to all the heads of HR is to be very transparent and be brave and start with the baseline and say, we are 5%. How do we get to 8%? And make it, you know, one step at a time. You want to think really big. These problems are huge, right? I mean, we're talking about things that have been happening forever and ever. But now you need to do a project or a program about this and get going. We have done pilots inside of NetApp where one of my sponsors and I worked on, he had the opportunity to hire 50 or 100 people. I said 50% of that are going to be women, and he did, right? And so if companies gave every single vice president a dashboard and said, not only do I want to see male, female, but I want to see diversity, you know, of race, of sexual orientation, of color. We need Black people, we need Asian people, because these companies are creating the technologies that go to 160 countries. You cannot have all white women in the team. You cannot have all Black guys in the team. It needs to be a mix of amazing representation and diversity. Here in California, we're like 50% of the population is Latino. Not one of them is a CEO. So where do you start? Understand your metrics inside the company and be transparent and be honest and accept, okay, we have a problem, and make it as a business goal. That is my ask for any CEO of a small startup or a huge company, right? And track it and track it and track it. And give these VPs and SVPs and C-suite folks that are so intelligent and clever and capable a metric to change. And if they're not changing, they gotta go.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's just like another thing. If you're not meeting your numbers, your P&L, your technology, this is a very serious issue that we're seeing. Women are leaving very, very rapidly, especially because of COVID and kids have been home and all of that. We're going backwards. You know, I don't look at the back. If women were considered as computers, we have to step it up. We have to move out of that discussion. We have to get very, very serious, because my sisters are leaving, right? And I want them in to create the next products that are going to be good for women and men.
Well, one, I don't know, positive conclusion I would draw out of Franziska's work is that indeed stereotypes can change. We can do a lot about that. And then there's another point, if we're talking about recruiting again and the pipeline. Nakima, I think we talked about that before, about the opportunity or the wish to have sort of gender blind recruitment processes. Do you see there any possibilities? I'm thinking about the example maybe you want to bring it again with the orchestras, and maybe we can get the connection to the business world.
Absolutely. I think exactly, well, first, 1000% agree with everything that Anna said, because it's absolutely true. If you're not quantifying and creating metrics around diversity, then it's just talk or performance and nothing changes. You have to incentivize or disincentivize executives, as the case may be, to actually deliver results on these goals, or else nothing changes. And you have systemic challenges that make it difficult for the recruiter, the lone HR representative, whomever is trying to push for diversity, to make a change and break the pattern if all that's been hired in the past are men. So I think that in terms of instant change and overnight change, what Corinna, you and I were talking about was the orchestra example, which is a great one, because much like the tech industry globally, women were being shut out and their numbers were ridiculously low. And there was clearly a problem with not only hiring, but also retention. And so they created the blind audition process, which was not just masking behind a curtain the auditioner auditioning musicians for any orchestra, but also I think you mentioned they went as far as to have them remove their shoes so that you couldn't determine from the sound of heels or their gait whether it was a man or a woman who would be auditioning for an orchestra. The equivalent of that in the digital world is CVs and online resume platforms. We are, well, now that it's been 8 years that I've been based in Germany, the shock has worn off. But the idea when I first moved here of putting a photo and putting all kinds of personal information, your birth date and so on your CV was so incredibly discriminatory to me. And it didn't change after I was in the position to hire people and I saw the level of personal bias that went into people reviewing photographs and names and how you pronounce them and where people are from, that I thought, when is this going to stop? And it's only very recently that a few companies that I know of that are startups in Berlin have started to say, don't send us your photo. Don't include information such as this and that. Don't give us anything we don't need beyond your qualifications, your eligibility to work with sponsorship or without, because clearly this is part of the reason why women are not getting through, why Turkish people are not getting through, why there are all kinds of groups that, parents who are female are not getting through. And it's just a simple change that would have a huge and immediate effect.
Yes, we had the Deutsche Telekom, one of the big blue chip companies here in Germany, our telecommunication, partly state-owned company. They introduced, or they had a project. I think it's like 10 years ago. They started a time where they had where they would receive only applications, and they would. They were somehow managed that those applications would have to be anonymous, and they found out surprisingly that supported diversity. I don't know why not so many other companies would follow that example. Anna, you had something to add.
Yeah. So this is all very academic, getting the ladies through the door is step number one, right? I agree with Nakima. Nakima, I used to live in Berlin, and when I had to put my photo, I was like, why am I putting my photo on my resume? It felt so wrong, Yes, as Francisca was saying, resume is super, super important. But when these young women, especially younger women, show up at Facebook, at Google, at PayPal, at Apple, at NetApp, what happens? Right? Especially if they're going into the technical teams, how do they find their voice? How do they find a mentor right away? Are these gentlemen ready to be challenged by a 25-year-old who's out of college? It's a whole orchestration that needs to happen. You were talking about unconscious bias. I would say every time there's a new female that goes into the workforce, the manager needs to take the unconscious bias class. And not just, they start diverging. They're like, well, there's unconscious bias about guys. I'm like, no, this is about the female. You know, we want to retain these ladies because our products need to reflect society. The conversations can go into so many directions. And that's why I keep saying, like, at this point where I am at my career, the position that I have, having seen this in too many companies, if we don't give the top a goal, like board of directors should be demanding the stats, the metrics, you know, how are you doing? There's many companies now here in the States that are asking for investors and are looking at, if your board of directors doesn't have at least 2 or 3 females, we're not going to invest. So we have to start playing ball. This story of like, oh, the resume and the words and the auditions, this is like, we have to move past all of that. I think we need to play harder. We need to play ball. It's moving too slowly otherwise. I mean, it already shows that we went back, you know, 100 years because of the pandemic. So how do we leapfrog? You know, it's with a lot of accountability and new rules of engagement. The story about how to rewrite job descriptions is very old here in the Silicon Valley. Like, we need to have very candid conversations at the C-suite, at the board level, and lean into that discomfort. It's okay. We're all on the same boat. All companies are on the same boat, right?
Yes.
So I would be a little bit more active.
Okay. Before I move on, I want to remember our audience that you can put questions, post questions, and we will soon start to answer them. But I want to get back. We have talked now about the CEOs or the managers who can take anti-unconscious bias classes, or how can you say that? Here in Germany, we have also tried to we're trying to force companies to finally get more women on the boards. That works because it's, well, they have to. And we can, of course, talk a lot about the women themselves. And I would like to get back to Nakima, because also we heard a lot about that. You, for example, and Anna too, you said, hey, we were used to being the first ones, the first women in organizations, in the companies. I know, and I found it very interesting, Nakima, what you said when you moved from the United States, when you moved to Germany, about your feeling belonging to a minority, and maybe you want to share that with the community, because I found it very interesting for the German perspective.
Not sure what I'm not sure what angle you're referring to. There are many minorities I belong to.
All right, I can just cite it, because you said, well, when I moved from the States, where I was used to belonging to, I had this minority status as a Black person. I would always be the only one. Then I moved to Europe, and suddenly my minority status changed. It changed to being a female. And yeah, you had some really interesting aspects about how women over here, how are the differences, what we expect, and what we bring in, how we lean in, and question if we're trying to do a professional career to fulfill it.
Right. Okay. So now I understand which minority. It was initially being Black, and then it was being female. In Germany, it was being a woman, and it was also being a mom. So all of these subgroups were less important than being a Black person in the United States, for reasons I think we all know. But in terms of what it meant, making the shift into managerial and executive positions in Germany as a woman, I was just much more conscious of the fact that not only is there such pressure that's put on women to identify if they are parents, if they are mothers, as mothers first and foremost, with no balancing really expected or appreciated. If you are trying to do career and motherhood, this is not something that's normal or normalized in Germany, which is something that it is very much more normalized in North America, I would say. And I was also really struck by the sense that many of the women that I met within the German context, German or other nationalities living in Germany, were struggling under the pressure of being perceived as less than perfect mothers because they were trying to have a career or change careers. And this doesn't really exist in much of North America because it's simply so expensive in most of the major cities that of course you're supposed to put your heart and soul into pursuing a career. I had almost never been exposed to women who were struggling with, should I even try to have a career? I'm being judged negatively by everyone around me for trying to have a career. And this is very present in Germany, and I think in lots of other European countries. So it's quite different, and it's something we still have to work against because, again, the reality is that if we are not included in particularly these cutting edge areas of research and development in tech, then we are very likely to be subjected to this minority worldview. And it's just going to be the minority that happens to hold all of the positions and the patents and is doing all of the research. And when the products, the services that create the future digital worlds that we engage with are unfriendly, unwelcoming, uninteresting, and useless to us, we won't have anyone to blame but ourselves. You know, this is the reason we need to be involved and we need to have a seat at the table. You know, we're more than 50% of the society.
Yes, and what I really liked when we were talking about this topic ahead, you said we were also talking about how is it different over here in the States, like for example, paying for childcare, because of course it's really expensive, and the German system is definitely supportive of a family where one earns a lot of money and the other one stays at home. It makes it just so much more comfortable. But you said that, well, the expenses you have for childcare, you have to see them as an investment for your future and your career. So that's really a business perspective on the whole thing.
The US forces you to do that. I mean, in the US, it is an investment because it's that much money if you want quality childcare for most women and who don't have family members who they can give the entire responsibility to. It's not such a breathtaking expense in much of Germany. And I think that because of that, there's this underlying assumption that, well, the woman might as well spend all of her time occupied with childcare. This is something that I also found rarely will you see this outside of very elite circles in the US, because unless you're earning so much that there's an opportunity cost of staying home with your child, you know, you have 3 months, you take your 3 months and then you go back to work and you pay 40% of your salary to make sure your child is in good hands. That's just how it is. So that is not ideal. Obviously, I did it both ways. I took years off with my first child and I took 3 months off with my second and then quit and took 3 years off. But I felt like here in Berlin in particular, there's not any expectation that you would ever want to get back. And when you want to get back to work, then the questions you're asking are very different. You're asking questions about how well you'll be accommodated. You're asking questions about who else is there. Are you going to be the only woman? Are you going to be the only parent? And these are all questions that are valid if you're committed and you really want to get back full time to working, but very often you don't have good answers. And even more often, you have no idea what to expect in terms of company culture. So you come back into the workforce only to discover, this isn't for me. And then there's lots of support for just dropping out long-term, 10 years, or more. I have lots of neighbors who've done that. And there's very little censure about choosing just not to engage in the workforce.
So before we get to answer the first question out of the chat, I would like to focus again on the experience or the pandemic situation we are all having now for 13, 14 months. How has this changed your work life, especially, and the situation for women in tech? How would you describe it? Has it worsened or has it stayed the same? Maybe, I don't know, Franziska, if you want to start, if you can say anything about this, how you experienced that.
Well, my personal life didn't change that much. I mean, obviously, I only worked from home from, I think, at least November on, and when the first wave hit. But I'm also in a position where I don't have many responsibilities. Like, I don't have to make sure my kids are in good hands. I didn't have these problems, so I was lucky, I guess, when it came to that. But at my workplace, I see people struggling and thinking, oh my God, how do I organize my day? What do I do with my kids? The kita is closed, you know, and we also see that in research already that women are majorly disadvantaged in this pandemic, because a lot of the times they're the ones who stay at home with the kids and don't go to work or can't do work because someone has to take care of the kids, and their men keep going. And that makes sense because they make more money, and in tech, men make even more money than in the average in Germany. So we have to do something about that.
Anna, maybe you can say something. How is it in the Silicon Valley? Because you also mentioned like how you would ask people to go for lunch and everything, and all of that hasn't been possible in these times. Is that worse concerning the role of men or the future of women in the tech industry?
Well, I agree with what Francisca was saying. Women, I have many personal girlfriends that just quit. They quit. One difference that, because I have a lot of family, my brothers and cousins in Catalonia, the difference is in California, this is the first month, just think about this, that kids are going back to school. So we have been home since March of 1919 now, with everybody in the household. So these kids are coming to interrupt the meetings of like, hey, the Wi-Fi went down, and the cat just, you know, crosses the screen. In my household, we had to buy 2 different services of Wi-Fi because I have kids in college. There was one in high school, you know, all of us with big jobs. It's been such a pressure cooker, right? Because at the beginning we thought it was 6 weeks and then 10 weeks. And then it just mentally became so horrible just looking at the news of what's happening in Africa, what's happening in India. Many women left. There's stats, Francisca, I don't know what the stats are, but some people are talking about we went back like 10 years. You know? And it's a mental health issue also, what we are all going through. Guys are going through it as well, right? I don't want to say this much as men and women. I mean, we all are in this pandemic. One thing that NetApp and many companies have done is they've stepped up their mental health hours. So for example, everybody inside NetApp has 25 free visits with a psychiatrist or a therapist. And I actually talked to them about one of my kids, right? Because these kids all of a sudden we're all in Zoom. They're locked in their bedrooms. You know, the house is, I have a big house, I'm very lucky, but we still hear each other, right? Some people are like, oh, now my meeting, I need to be louder than your meeting. When do we eat? All of a sudden, I am cooking twice a day when I used to cook once a day, right? There's more food, so all these new rules, right? But there is hope. Kids just went back into the schools here in the States. So true of what Nakima was saying about the United States and Europe. The United States has there's 0 social programs for moms. When my kids were born, I was allowed 6 weeks to take care of them. And so the 3 months is more of a recent thing of the last few years. It's a pretty ruthless society, and so yeah, it's tough. It's tough. You need to. This is why you want to be surrounded by really good girlfriends, who understand you and maybe can cope with you, and you can go on walks and spill the beans. Like the best thing that ever happened to me was I went on walks with my neighbors, right? Where before I didn't used to because I had to commute. So now we're like, how are we going to stay strong together? Who's going to the supermarket and kind of form? It's all changing, right? It's all changing.
So I don't know, Nakima, if you want to add something, how Corona worsens the situation for women in tech.
I mean, I don't want to make it a worse or a negative story, but I definitely want to point out that the thing that most struck me throughout this 13 months or however long it's been that we've been trapped at home is that there are very privileged and there are less privileged survivors of this whole pandemic experience. And the less privileged are those women who are working in women-dominated fields, such as customer service and customer facing and travel and other areas, events management, these kinds of areas that often have a higher representation of women, many of whom completely lost their livelihoods. And if you weren't lucky enough to work in a European country that had recovery funds, you might not have gotten any compensation for the loss of your industry and your job. I think that realizing that privilege and recognizing that privilege of being able to immediately stop traveling, stop commuting, work from home, turn on your Wi-Fi, split it with your family, your kids, is something not everybody got to enjoy. And many women that I work with and that have come to Frauenloop, which had a markedly higher number of applicants in the middle of last year, when people were getting laid off in droves, and up to this present time, was based on women saying, okay, I don't think travel is any longer a very reliable industry for me. I don't necessarily want to be replaceable. I feel like I'm not very stable in my career in whatever it is, event management or some area of marketing. I'm interested in getting into tech. This has been really interesting for me because it's put the pressure on me to then sell, why should you? And what awaits you? If you do the work, if you invest in yourself, if you try to reconfigure your career and your skills and your mindset, what awaits you? Are you going to always be the only? If you manage to push your way into a tech company of good reputation, or are you going to be able to actually build a network and be able to navigate the tech sector with some understanding of which companies treat their employees better and which companies are ready to invest and support juniors and career changers? And this is the kind of thing that has become even more important in my view since COVID, because now women know what to ask and they know what they're looking for. They're not just thinking, oh, everybody's talking about tech, I want to figure out if it's for me. They're looking for the stability. They're looking for the ability to work at home. This is what they say when they apply. They're saying, I want to be one of those people who opens my laptop, I could be anywhere, because they know that this is one of the perks of this heavily male-dominated industry.
Nakima, I would say one thing, because I've brought in a lot of women inside NetApp that were not techies, so they were not, computer scientists. In the case, you just reminded me of this person that is from the travel industry. So NetApp does need a travel team, right? Because executives are going to start traveling. So why don't we find these women that are coming from the hotel industry or from the travel industry or lawyers or HR, they need to participate as well. And one thing that I did inside NetApp, so women in technology, when I took it on, they were 200 women. And I said, if you're inside NetApp, it doesn't matter if you're the travel manager or the PR manager or the marketing manager, we're all going to be in it together. Because we all have to understand the technology inside of NetApp. So I think inclusion is very, very important. Like This is not about computer scientists or engineers. You have to bring in your sisters in because they are going to prop you up, and together you can look for pay gap. You know, you can ensure that there's more training for females, and you're going to have more girlfriends inside the company to support each other, right? So invite women from other industries. These companies need lawyers and travel managers and all kinds of stuff.
This is
We
the,
have,
we have to go.
yes, we have actually we have two questions I would like to ask you. Maybe the first one is one for Franziska, because somebody is asking, as a hiring manager for technical roles, what can I do to get more diverse applicants for open developer positions? We've already had the advice, work on the recruitment description itself, the title. Are there any other advices you can give?
Look into the problems. I think they're pretty obvious once you look at stats. And I think hiring managers have to develop a sense of gender competencies, is how we call it, and be aware of the challenges women face and take these challenges seriously, and to take women in general seriously. I think this is the most important point, that we start to take women seriously and actually value their work, and make every effort you can to hire more women, and tell your recruiters that you want to have female applicants. And once you have the chance to make a change, really push for it and really try to get these juniors, for example, from programming boot camps, for example, into your company, and make this effort. And once you build this critical mass of around 30%, it will just spiral up, and more women will come to this company, because it makes it actually interesting.
I would add to
Yes.
that you should also start by hiring male managers with communication skills and mentoring ability, and make that a part of their quantifiable contributions on the job, not just that they're able to push their teams to get the code deployed on time and without errors, but also that they know how to develop and mentor and explain and bring along junior engineers, so that when you finally get the junior engineers that you may have to start with in order to get more women, that they don't find themselves in a hostile or unappreciative or impossible to navigate team and culture, because the senior, women developer unicorns, they're not interested in being the only ones, especially if they're good. They're not going to look at your company if you're going to say, oh, you're going to be the first woman that we're hiring. No, thanks. So you need to start somewhere. And the way to start, I would say, is certainly with junior engineers. Frauenloop is there for that, but it's also that you have some kind of program that you're setting up to support those women so that they don't leave, because you want to invest in them. They will certainly, all the research shows, invest in the companies that give them a chance and be loyal to those companies. But then you have to do the work to ensure that they grow, that they progress, and that they're evaluated, as is not often the case outside of tech. They're evaluated on potential, just like men. And they're not evaluated on their past history and what they've already accomplished, whereas men are promoted based on what they might accomplish in the future.
All right. We have one more question, and it's a multi-layer question. I would ask you to answer shortly, because it's about the quota for women on boards. And we have our history with the quota in Germany. We've been discussing it for decades, and we had the companies who said, hey, we can manage it ourselves, and not really anything changed or happened. So now we have a quota. And the question is, what do you think about a quota? My personal opinion, I don't want to get a post because of a quota. I want to get it because I'm the best for the position. So I hope you have quick answers for that. Who wants to start? If
Well,
you're...
I am on some boards, and you have to work it. It's very difficult to get into these public or private boards. Even nonprofits, sometimes it's hard. Nonprofits is a good place to go and play and start learning what does it take to collaborate at that level. I don't care. If quotas are going to help us get us in, that's fine. But yeah, they need to look, the processes of getting onto a board is very complex. They interview you 50 times, so they will make sure you are the right person. They're not making you VP or getting you into a board because you're a woman. I mean, we have to stop talking like that. You have to become the best of whatever it is that is your passion, and then you'll get in. That's how I look at it.
Nakima or Franziska, you want to add something?
I think quotas are fine if you're desperate and you need them, but metrics are better. And metrics for those board members, as well as their senior executives, are far more effective because they're far more transparent. And all that we need to see is, you know, as Anna mentioned, as Melody Hobson talks about every time that she gets a microphone, you have to measure what your executives are doing to push diversity forward. If you don't, what gets measured gets handled and gets managed. And if it's not measured in some tangible way that's tied to executive performance and retention, then it's not going to change. All the board members' quotas in the world are not going to change the reality within the companies and on the ground.
Yeah, and for my research, I interviewed quite a few women who are really successful in the tech industry. And they all said in the beginning when they entered, they didn't want quotas exactly because of what you just said, Corinna, in this question. But later on in their career, they all came to the conclusion that it will take the quotas because otherwise it's not going to change.
Okay, thanks a lot. So my last question is going to Nakima and Franziska, because we still have the fairy godmother here. Anna has already had her wish. So what is your wish that could be fulfilled by the fairy figure for women in tech, looking into the future? What would be the most important thing in your view which needs to be changed?
Shall I go ahead? I think
yes, go ahead.
My biggest wish in this, but not only for tech, I think for the society as a whole, is that we take women and their needs seriously, and that we have this perception of ourselves that we want the products that shape our society, because this is what tech does, it shapes our society, that they are built by people who reflect our society and the reality of our society.
I guess I would echo what Franziska says, but also my wish is that women in tech or outside of it start looking around and seeing what the reality of the tech industry today is, which is mostly male, and they start to recognize the need to develop their own networks and to become their own role models, sponsors, as the case may be, for other women. You know, that means the succession planning that Anna was talking about, whatever level you're at, and the mentoring and the assistance professionally to any other woman who needs it, because nobody else is offering this and we're not getting it otherwise. So absolutely, my wish is that women recognize that it's not only by dint of hard work, which you will certainly do if you want to make it in the tech industry, but it's also based on working with others and uplifting others and leaving the doors open that you're able to get through. That is what makes change.
Build a sisterhood.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, everybody. There are two things I learned today, and I would point out in the end again. And the first thing was mathematical knowledge is not crucial for becoming a good coder or programmer, and coding skills are not crucial for a career in the tech industry. So we should all remember. Yes. Thanks again to all of you and to the questions from outside. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion. And yes, I wish you a pleasant evening, a pleasant day, pleasant work day wherever you are right now. Thanks again also to Marie and Tobias Young and the teams behind who managed all of this working. And yeah, I apologize again if there were times you wouldn't hear me. I can just, it's really not because my sons were watching or using any streaming streaming applications. So I don't know. Yeah, but I hope that was only for a short period of time. So
it was great. Thank you, Karina. I want to follow up with Francisca and Nakima. Now I'm super excited about getting to know them. Like, oh my God, this is so cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.